If you're a big sports fanatic and you do nothing to make yourself happy as a hobby, you're applying for Depression 101.
I drove my car with my eyes closed through a traffic light at 120 k's an hour in the hope that it was about an 8-lane road, in the hope that I'd be hit by a car or a truck.
It was dark outside and I was just there, and then there was a thought that crossed my mind. It was like, it would just be better if it was all over.
I had to follow an eating plan, and that eating plan had me eating 6 times a day, and I hated it.
Mental health is the one thing that people tend to steer away from communicating. So I think, there is that focus, like you say, on 1 day or 2 days, if you put International Mental Health Day in as well, where people are happy on that day to kind of speak about the stigma and to break it down and to share stories of I'm struggling. And then always after that day, it seems like everyone just gets back onto the treadmill and life continues.
I think taking care of your mental health is very important, but it's knowing where you are and how you feel. Because I also don't think it's a blanket statement having mental health issues as a person. I think it's also situational. As people grow older, environments change, like we had the pandemic, professionally things change, people go through divorces, or growing up itself creates different challenges in your mental health. So I think just staying centered and attending to every problem as it appears is what kept me afloat.
Have you ever battled with your mental health?
I think I battle every day. But I choose happiness. I choose gratitude every day. I think my thing was switching from looking at life as my adversary instead of my partner in having a good time. So I used to look at life and I would think, why is everything happening to me? But now I look at life and I think, why is everything happening for me? And why shouldn't it? Then once I answer those 2 questions, I start looking at life differently. I choose the characters of my day. So I look at my day like a scene in a movie. So for example, yesterday I went to Cape Town. So I thought to myself, how many people do I expect to meet on my way there and my way back? Then I started mentally picturing it. And I thought, okay, in the Uber, 1 person. At the airport, probably 50 people. Inside the plane, probably 100 people. At the airport there, probably another 100 people. Where I'm going at that office, there's probably 5 people that I'm gonna have to interact with, and the same way again back. So I choose the characters and how I choose to react to every scene. So many times the external factors don't have influence in how I react. I've already chosen my reaction. I wanna have a good day, I wanna impact people positively, and I'll make it my mission to do so. So that's how I've chosen to cope with any type of situation every day.
We're living in a time of elevated anxiety. We've convinced ourselves we're more connected than we've ever been because of things like social media. What we fail to recognize is that we are more dislocated than we've ever been, because those are not real connections. We sense connection, we strive for the connection, we'll do anything to get the post, the like, the share, the acknowledgement online, but it's all false. Because ultimately we are comparing our insecure inner self, which occurs privately, to the projections of other insecure people. So we are comparing our inadequate self to the lies online. And when I was born 51 years ago, I could only meet my parents, and then my family, and then my extended family, and then my friends, and then my social group in a series of graduations. I was given time to temper myself. Children born today instantly compared impossibly to images that are generated not even by the user but by AI.
100%. Look, my dad has always said that he can teach me this, and I have to relate to swimming because that's all I really know. I can teach you this, but I can't teach you this. If your mind is gone, you got no chance anywhere. I've always believed that my biggest strength is my mind. It's never been my swimming ability. If you look at me, I'm not the biggest guy, I'm not the strongest guy, I can't pick up the most weight. I'm not even the best at everything I do. I'm resilient. I'm tough mentally. And when I had problems mentally and when I was in not the space I needed to be, you saw how my swimming fell apart. So in everyday life, 100%, and in sportsman's life, the mental health is way more important than the physical. I promise you that.
It's become quite trendy to, put men down, say men are the problem, toxic males, and I mean, we are responsible for a lot of stuff, absolutely. I feel sorry for young men young boys, now, growing up with this kind of mark. I think there are large groups of society that are more tolerant and trying to understand it better.
I think we've been raised into a society where to be a man, you don't express emotion, you don't cry, you don't show yourself to be seen as weak. Because in that, people see you almost as you don't qualify for being able to lead a business, being able to lead your family. It is frowned upon to a large extent, I think, within society to say, I'm a male, I lead a business, I lead a family, I like to see myself as a manly man in some shape or form, but I still had to see a counselor, and I still had to engage with people on my emotions level. And it doesn't mean by doing so I'm weaker. It's actually been able to empower me to help other men to realize, like, if I'm struggling and you're struggling, we have something in common. We both men, we kind of see the world in a similar way. And if there's hope for me, there's hope for you.
So I have to go and tell people that I can't handle my lasagna. That's not very manly. Like, that's quite it sometimes feels like it's an emasculation. But in a way, it's also liberating, because once I've told people that, the sky never fell in when I say, listen, I have to watch dessert, because it's much sexier to be, I used to spike up with heroin, like, I used to drink a case of, vodka, I can't handle scones, But when I get beyond that fear, and I understand that other men come and go, oh, you know what, I can't handle my scones either. Okay, now we can bond, and so there's a peace in the truth, and for me, that's ultimately what I want the rest of my life to be about, is trying to help people get to the truth in a way where it's not going to be always safe, it's not going to be easy, it's not going to be without that kind of shocking discomfort, but the more we get resilient about sharing the truth, because I'm scared we're going to teach people that we must cuddle them to mental wellness. No, that's bullshit, because that's what got us here in the first place. This inability to sit with discomfort until it passes. We process it. We want to escape it.
Men do not have hobbies. Men learn very late to have hobbies. That's if they're lucky enough to do so. When people watch sport, when men watch sport, they're living vicariously through other men. And I always think, if you're a big sports fanatic and you do nothing to make yourself happy as a hobby, you're applying for Depression 101. Because I've often heard people who love sport criticizing someone who drops a ball in a rugby match, or misses a try, or misses a penalty in football, and I could see the frustration and the seething anger that they feel. But when you look deep down into it, it's just resentment of someone who does what they love, gets rewarded highly, gets admired, and they had one task to do. And in your head, it feels like they failed. But they wake up again, and then they do it again. They've got a family. The sport is not their life. You are drunk now, you throw beers, you sweat, everyone start a brawl, you still have to go live a life at home because you don't have an outlet, and Monday morning you're back in traffic again. And these are the kind of people we set loose to the public. These are the kind of people who are walking around parking lots after parking because they are still upset, and they're walking in the malls. And in America it manifests with school shootings and people shooting up malls. But here it's road rage. We don't understand how many people are armed and how many people are upset at the same time. So I feel like the sooner we teach young men to have hobbies, the better.
South African men are, you look at how the box performed these last couple of weeks. That's what we are as South African men. We're tough guys, we want to scrum, we want to ruck, we want to physical people, how Rassi says. That's how I think men view ourselves in South Africa. Like wherever you go, it's, you hurt yourself, rub some salt on it. You know what I mean? That's the kind of, take a teaspoon of cement, toughen up, it's just how we grew up, I think, in South Africa. That's just how it's always been.
If I had to put it down to something, in 2004, my sister and I were two survivors on a beach in Thailand when the tsunami hit, and we were two of a handful of survivors where a couple thousand died. And for us, that was the initial trauma that I dealt with to some extent. I went for trauma counseling, but your brain is somewhat impacted by that experience for life. And I think you have to learn how to rewire your thinking patterns and how to actually understand the trauma and to work it through and work through the emotions. And it is quite a long story, but a couple of days after that we came back to South Africa, and the trauma wasn't just the tsunami, it was everything else that went with that, in the aftermath, the days afterwards. We then returned to Joburg. We had a flash flood at my parents' house, and the roof collapsed on me, and I was paralyzed. I was rushed into hospital. I was put into traction. I had damaged my spine quite badly. Fast forward that story, I came through, was able to walk again and went through recovery, but that was the second trauma that at that stage I was still dealing with the tsunami, and the next thing happened. I didn't have time to kind of process both, so I shifted the tsunami off, and now I was dealing with the next trauma. So that happened. Then I went up to Nigeria. I contracted pneumonia after being there for 3 weeks. I had a lung infection, rushed into a private hospital. I was in a medically induced coma. My family came up to see me. They were told I wasn't going to make it. So that was another trauma I went through, and I was able to pull through on the back end of that. So it almost feels impossible to have dealt with that trauma, but I thought at the end of that year, let me just close that chapter and say it's done with, and I'm moving forward, and I continued on life. But then what I did is I tried to fuel and fill the gap, the void that I had with all the trauma and the emotions I was going through with work, and work became my focus and my outlet.
I've been blessed to have traveled the world and had many more life experiences than the average human, but I never really had a childhood, so to speak. So all I've known is swimming, train, have my holiday, come back, January the 2nd, just when swimming falls apart and you're having this, I don't know what you want to call it, breakdown, let's call it, right? It's a really hard place to be in, because you have the pressure of South Africa and the world on you for this third Olympics. Everyone's expecting you to, get more medals for South Africa, and you're fighting a battle that no one really understands besides a very few small group of people. And it was a very slippery slope. It was a very difficult time. And the hardest part was actually after the Olympics, because I got to the games and I was numb from emotion, because I was so mentally exhausted from the stuff that I was going through at the time in those 7 months leading up. And I thought I was fine. You're like, I'm fine. Come 7 p.m. and it's like, you can't enjoy the simple things in life anymore. Like I appreciate playing a bit of FIFA by myself. I love doing it. I'm a PlayStation guy. It's not that I'm a gamer every day, but I just like in the evenings, just 30 minutes, couple matches at Old Trafford, makes me calm. It makes me excited, it makes me calm. I couldn't even enjoy that anymore. It got to a stage where I was just like, I guess I wasn't diagnosed clinically, but I was for sure depressed.
I grew up as a fantasist. I didn't know, I took shortcuts from a young age to get approval. And as a result of that, I never went through the tempering process that I think other children who didn't use fantasy went through. I chose escape without fail, building an enormous overdraft of emotional work that I should have done, which I never did. So essentially grew up as a coward because I didn't face my stuff. I was an escape artist supreme. And that then there was some horrible abuse and sexual abuse, which if you take someone who's already headed down a strange route and you put them in a safe room, because that's what children do at a young age. We build safe rooms, and it's a perfectly valid strategy. I'm not going to judge my 11-year-old self for what I did. The problem with a safe room for a social creature is that we get cut off. So we're safe from being hurt, but we're not allowing ourselves to connect to other human beings, anyone. There's this private space inside. And what happens over time is that safe room becomes a prison. The strangeness is that the key's on the inside. So the best way for me to explain it is, and we'll talk a little bit about the eating disorder, but if you starve yourself of what you need, you build an enormous hunger. So then what happens is you will find someone and you will binge on them. In other words, you will love bomb that human being. And at first, it's wonderful for them. But for anyone who's ever eaten too much, way too much, you will know that it starts off really cool and then suddenly gets horrible and you've got to purge. So you purge that person, but in the meanwhile, you've convinced another human being to be open with you. They've shared, you haven't. So now they've had the experience of trusting and getting hurt. In effect, I gave them a reason to build their own safe room. So my problem compounded on other people. Because I love cooking. I'm from a family of restaurateurs. Like my dad was a really good chef, and I love cooking. So that was really funny, the kind of, bulimic chef. So there are three primary behaviors that seem to cluster for me, and that's starving, binging, and purging. That's how we term them. It's very interesting that it's normally seen as a women's thing. We see all kinds of people, and I've got over the shame of it. Like I've got over that now, because the need for other men to hear that I have that problem, particularly with my sort of hardcore image in comedy. People are probably sitting watching this going, oh, he looks so gentle. But particularly with that image, I love people to know that someone that would go no ways, yes ways. And it's very dangerous. It has the highest morbidity rate of all disorders, eating disorders as a grouping. More people die. You don't realize the damage you do to your body over time, how many of your health systems get damaged, and that will definitely can result in premature death. It's the secrecy and the shame that like, it's almost like putting a grenade in like a strong tin. It just amplifies the damage. So I'm big on telling people that, particularly at schools. I cannot believe how many children approach us afterwards to talk about how desperate they are, how sad, how disconnected, how suicidal, how hopeless they are. And there's a relief on particularly young men's faces when they come and go like, thank you, because I didn't know who to talk to about this, you know. So yeah, it's a struggle, and it's not about the food. That's another important thing. It's really about the patterns underneath. The food is the tool that we use to express it, but essentially it's self-harm.
I think I've never really struggled with anxiety. I've struggled with depression a little bit after my son passed away. He was only 6 months old, so there was a lot of guilt associated to it. It was a cot death. So there was nothing anyone could do. There was nothing anyone could have predicted. So it was one of those situations where you had to accept it was meant to happen the way it happened. I didn't know what I could have done differently. I didn't know how much time I could have spent with him before, and so many things that I've still wanted to do, because with children you also just don't mourn their loss, you mourn what could have been.
There's a level of self-loathing, and which comes often from low self-esteem, you know, and a lack of worth. And the problem with lack of worth is, unless you start to do things that are what we call esteemable, you will continuously perpetuate that you don't deserve. And I want to go back to that safe room, which is now a prison cell, languishing in a prison cell. That's what I deserve. I deserve that. And we, you know, there's a lot of psychological writing about how people who've been abused eventually become their own abuser, and in that room. And so I agree on the self-punish. Like, I don't deserve better. So that's got to be, that narrative has to be broken.
And I was just walking in Foy's Mall with Sam and Ava on I think it was the 1st of October, and I dropped down in Foy's Mall thinking I'm having a heart attack. And in that moment, you kind of wish you were having a heart attack, because there's so much focus on you and you're dropping down and everyone's coming in. And I got rushed to hospital only to be told probably 2 or 3 times, my boy, you actually just having a panic attack, and it's an extreme panic attack. And I was hoping it was going to be a heart attack, because how would I tell my family now, my friends, that I actually had a panic attack? So I was diagnosed with severe depression and a generalized anxiety disorder at the end of 2016. Fast forward a month later, I was on medication. I tried to commit suicide. I drove my car with my eyes closed through a traffic light at 120 km an hour, in the hope that it was about an 8-lane road, in the hope that I'd be hit by a car or a truck. And I know we can look back and say, firstly, I'm incredibly thankful it didn't happen for my sake, but it was for someone else, because in the moment I wasn't thinking about who cares if I hit someone else, or who cares if I drive into a wall. For me, it was the only way to escape what I was feeling. It was planned in the morning, so this happened in the afternoon. My wife had planned to go to a event, so she went with my mom, and I think it was that morning that I said goodbye to them when they left, that I knew I was going to do it. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I knew that that day was my day. Having come through that, and at the end of the day having to now share this, why I did what I did with my family, it was a heartbreaking moment, not just for me but for them to actually experience, like, an hour earlier it could have been the end of me, which would have changed the trajectory of my family's life, especially my kids, for the rest of their lives.
You know, and there was a time when was it? It was October 21, when it was a couple of months after Olympics. We were on this ISL, which was like a swimming league that we had, and we were basically staying in our own rooms, and we were isolated because it was also still heavy COVID, and it was in Eindhoven at the time. And I remember I was sitting in the room, it was dark outside, and I was just there, and then there was a thought that crossed my mind, was like, it would just be better if it was all over. I was like, whoop, no, okay, we're not good. Call my dad right away. Because I'm like, I would never do that, I'm not that kind of guy. But it was just that thought that came through my mind was scary. I'm not the kind of guy that's ever believed in depression or mental health. I haven't. I always used to I used to laugh at people. I'd be like, no, I understand it so much now, And as South Africans, like I said, as men in South Africa, we're these tough, big, strong rugby player kind of guys. And man, we fall even harder than regular people sometimes because we go through a lot. And I think I was blessed to have a family that I do, a father and a mother and sister and 2 brothers that have supported me throughout everything. And yeah, that moment in October, I was just like, wow, this was an all-time low for me because I say it again, I'm not that kind of guy. I've never had that thought again, but it was just that so much was going on. My mind was completely wobbled.
Last year, I thought I was invincible. I was running a support group for people with anxiety, depression. We had 250 people on our list. We had a fairly decent-sized group meeting. I was dealing with these conversations of depression every day, sitting down having coffees with customers. But I had actually neglected my own personal walk of health and mental health. And last year, just before a big milestone birthday, I'm not going to give it away, but just before my 40th birthday, 2 days before, I contemplated suicide again, and I didn't let my family in on it. And I didn't realize how quick it felt, like it so quickly crept up on me. But when I look back now, all the warning signs were there. I'd lost my passion, desire to be around people. I had no desire to do the work I was doing. I lost my accountability structure with certain people around me. I became a lot more inwardly focused, very insular, isolated, and it was very humbling last year in October to get to a point of almost wanting to take my life again. 2 days later, having my birthday, breaking the news to my family, like 2 days ago, I was about to do it. I was very close to doing it. But what I had learned at that point is I immediately said I need help.
Someone that I treated really badly said to me, why don't you go and get help? And I did. And then I realized that comedy was part of the problem, so I stopped it. And that was 5 years ago. I've done little bits and pieces, but recently I've realized that I cannot do it anymore. I've made peace with that now. I always left the door open, like I'll be back. I won't. That's how I feel now. Unless something happens and I can find a way to do it in a healthy way. But right now I can't see a way for me to do it without seeking that affirmation, and I don't want that at the moment.
So my dad was begging me from January to speak to a psychologist, and I was like, I'm fine, brave heart over here, And it cost me dearly, not just in my mental health capacity, but it cost me at the Olympics, I believe, because I was not in 2020, I was not 2021, I wasn't the Chad that you see today, because I was going through a lot, And yes, COVID didn't help from a physical point of view, but it wasn't the same Chad that everyone, kind of knows. And it was harder because the result wasn't what I wanted, I got 5th and I just missed out on a medal and I was very close, but, it was just slightly off, and I was like, and then I just thought about everything, that if I just had put the pieces in my life together, it would have been okay. Because unfortunately, I'm still like that today, and it's hard for me to admit, but like my happiness is so premeditated on my success in the pool. So my image is Chad the Clever athlete. It's not the person that I am. Like, it's terrible, but like I can't help the way I feel. I'm working on it.
Absolutely. I seek therapy when I felt like I was hitting a wall. Nothing was working. Not enough videos on YouTube were working. Not enough books were working. Not enough smiles around the house were working. And I saw a therapist, and they basically taught me what I knew, and they just reminded me what I should have reminded myself all those years ago, when this thing had happened, is just focus on the good, focus on the memory, and stop blaming yourself. We are so quick to blame ourselves. I think we chastise ourselves so much in life when we do something wrong. When you drop the remote and the batteries fall out, you go, stupid me. And then when you don't make it on time, you go, how horrible am I? Or when something we're so quick to we're not kind to ourselves. I think the kindness starts from within before you expect it from other people.
And the programs that are designed for addicts specifically help you to mechanically, methodically go through the things in your life that have perpetuated those narratives and how to set them free and reclaim some kind of agency, and help others, which seems to be altruistic, but it's not. Helping others is vital in rebuilding your own sense of self. And the more you do it, the more you build yourself. So it's a very beautiful thing, and you're not a hero, you're not a saint. You are an addict who's trying to rebuild yourself, and so that's why it's called recovery, because you recover the parts of you that are of worth, and everyone has them. And a beautiful way I've learned to do it is, if I surrender and I get kind of start to heal my grown-up self, this grown-up self becomes the only adult in the world that can go back and comfort that child. And because I'm perfectly trained, I know the patient well, I understand their behaviors, I've been through what they've been through, I've done some work as that person, so the exercise of going back, and what happens is, when you do that, that child understands that letting go is going to be okay, because there's something you can trust. And then when that child lets go and surrenders to this trusting adult, the adult has a responsibility, which is a wonderful piece of integrity that you're giving yourself when you believed you had no integrity or self-esteem. So it gives you a mission, and then you integrate, and then when you meet other people, you're not looking for them to comfort that child, because often that's what causes those broken relationships for addicts, is we're looking for something that we need to give ourselves. So there's a beautiful thing where loss of control is often a violation, but surrender is an act of faith, and that's a beautiful thing that you develop. That's another thing, is faith. And the thing I love about eating disorders treatment is you can't abstain. It's not binary. You don't use. You have to face it every day. So you learn to become more balanced, and you keep learning to examine perspective. I also don't deny myself. Like, I've developed a bit of a sweet tooth, but I follow some simple rules. I try and eat until I'm moderately full. It took me a long time to even understand what that was. I had to follow an eating plan, and that eating plan had me eating 6 times a day, and I hated it because it wasn't under my control. And my body changed shape during that time, and that was terrifying. But I did what I was told, and I surrendered, and I trusted the people in charge. And then when I left that plan, I found a natural rhythm for myself.
I never allowed myself actually to look at the good. I focused too much on the bad and the loss of control that I had. And as soon as I returned to the principles and the teachings of Buddhism, I realized I have to let go. Let go of the grief, let go of the anger, let go of the blame, and also just celebrate his memory more than I celebrate the loss of his life. If that makes any sense.
It does.
Yeah.
You said that you were able to get out of your dark hole. Did anybody assist you in getting out of the dark hole?
My daughter did. She's a liver of life. I think if it wasn't for her, she's turning 16 now in September of this year. If she wasn't the person that she was, I don't think I would have made it. She just loves life. She's a bright spark. She looks at life differently. She always looks at the bright side of life. And I think just looking at her living after losing a brother and potentially seeing their own father, who was their only caregiver at the time, slipping away, it took a very strong 9-year-old to make it through that time, and she held on, and she was just living. She was the constant happiness in my life, and I started borrowing from that slowly until now. I hope to match her energy one day, but if it wasn't for her leading the way in being just a happy individual despite what was going on.
So I think we all have a role to play in that. I think as individuals we have a role. So I think we have a role to just do an audit of life. And an audit isn't a once a year thing. We don't get to 31 December and say my New Year's resolutions are X. which we break by day 2 anyway, we need to be doing an audit on a regular basis. We need to just be auditing our life. Am I feeling like I'm giving too much to work? Am I spending enough time around the people I love? Am I finding some kind of outlet to do something I love doing? We need to ask other people to do an audit on us as well. Like, am I really being, kind at the moment? Are you noticing my behavior is quite erratic? We need to be willing to listen to people we trust, and that's often a spouse or a close friend.
I have 3 to 4 hobbies that I partake in a week. I never miss one, and I try to do them as often as possible. And my career, because it's so much fun, comedy, people thought it was my hobby. And I say, no, comedy is one of the things that I do. I do many other things where I hang out with people who are not in the same career as me, but we love and we commute and we communicate because of the same thing. We love the same thing. And when we're done there, we become better partners, we become better comedians, become better CEOs, or become better doctors or plumbers, and we all live our lives. And we don't have time to be watching TV and criticizing other people and hating them for earning so much money for doing something that we think is so insignificant and we could have done better. And I think it starts there. Teach.
But like I say, now I wake up, I make sure I exercise, even if it's just doing a small walk in a day. I make sure I'm spending time with my kids. I make sure that and yes, we're living in a far smaller, more simplistic, minimalistic life and situation than we've ever been in. But gosh, we're happier than we've ever been, because we've had to. Everything we get, all these things we do, all the things we strive for, always come with a cost. Like if we're going after that, we're trading that thing for something else. And what is that? And I traded doing great things for time with my kids. I traded everyone else's mental health for my mental health. And I just had to look inwardly and say, like, I need to get myself right. And I have to practice it every day. Mental health it isn't like we go and have our vitamin B once a year or get our flu shot and we're good for the season. Mental health is something we need to practice every single day. We need to control our thoughts. We have to control our emotions. We have to work through the triggers. We have to be willing to just work through the journey.
If you feel it's, NA can incorporate all of them, but there are support groups, and they've got wonderful, what I love about them is that they are run and populated by people who have the same issue. And if you do that, if you go to those people, you'll find them online, you'll find them all over. If you go to those people, try your best to listen for what's similar. Don't listen to what's different, because that's how we build a case why I don't belong here. The only thing you need to earn your seat in that very loving place is that you want to stop this pattern that you feel is not good for you. And I promise that it will be scary, it'll be awkward, it'll be anxious, like all those things. It's like squeezing a boil, that stuff has to come out. But underneath it, there's you can always go back and you'll always be loved. I was always promised, we will love you until you can love yourself. And that was kept. So I'm trying to now, at this point, really focus on why I want to help other people. I've really dived into teaching at the school, which I love doing, and my studies. But more than that, I'm trying to establish a better relationship with myself, and I'm really enjoying a wonderful connection with my child, with my mum, with my sister, with my partner, and my friends. And I've realized that a small, well-connected life is so much better. It's so rich compared to a life that is always a stretch. People slip, and it's not a school. You don't fail and you have to repeat. You just come back and you just come back and you just come back, and then you can have 11 goes if you need to. But these people they know what it's like to wake up on a morning and go, oh, I did it again. I know, so did we. Pull in, give you a hug, can have a cup of coffee, tell us all about it. We love you. Come back tomorrow or don't. When you're ready, come back. We'll be here. The door's open. There's the coffee. Come and get a hug. How are you? Yeah.
Anyone that's in the process of the journey is just stick at it. Don't be ashamed to speak up, and don't be ashamed to be honest with yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and just be like, hey, this is not, you're not supposed to do this. Oh no, but I need this and I need it. Whatever it is, whatever it is, figure a way to just find the balance. Life is about balance. You have to. I learned that again, I have to bring it to sporting terms because that's how I tell stories, you know. And if you're only training, it won't work.
And I know a monk who's wonderful, who just said, he said, the wonderful thing about inner peace, it will never lie to you. It's impossible for inner peace to be dishonest. And so my mission now is to just find moments of that peace, cultivate it, and try and listen to what it has to say. And so as a result of that, I don't know if I'm going to be on Instagram for much longer.
I was lucky enough because I'd read so many books, and I had a mom who encouraged me always to try my best, and she always drilled this in our head when we were growing up. She said, you can always start over. From any situation, no matter how good, no matter how bad, you can always start over. And I took that principle from my career to my personal life. My superpower is being able to start over.
I look back now and I see how grateful I am of what my life journey, and I'm even grateful for that experience actually, even though as much as it was, it was the hardest thing I've had to go through, you know. And in some respects, not still have to go through, but I'm still somewhat carrying those pieces, put that final puzzle back together. I believe it happened for a reason, and it taught me to be even more resilient than what I think I really am.